Hey guys, I am the Comics Kid 2099 and I'm going to be doing another on the road video. I think I did one of these last week, might have been a week before, I think it was last week. And it's St. Patrick's Day, that's why I'm wearing my Green Lantern shirt. This will go up a few days after St. Patty's Day, but I'm filming this on St. Patrick's Day. And I was going to talk about a book that I reread the other day, Saturday. I have recently been in a Teen Titans mood, and the problem with that is that there is not a lot of Teen Titans stuff out there, or at least there's not a lot of good stuff. I have all of Jeff Jones's run in trades, and I think I've said this before, I'm not exactly a fan of that run. There are some things about it that I like. For example, I really like the idea of the Teen Titans who are in their mid-20s kind of being a big brother, big sister program for the younger sidekicks who are like 16. I really like that idea. Unfortunately, that idea wasn't really explored that much in that series, and I feel like some of the best elements of that series were kind of cribbed from the Marv Wolfman run of the 1980s, which is my favorite run of Teen Titans. And the big problem is that whole run is not very readily available. If you have never read a whole lot of comic books and you heard someone like me talking about the Marv Wolfman run on Teen Titans, and you're like, well, I want to read that, you would go online and you would find that all of it is like impossible to find on trade. For example, the Judas Contract, I think that's out of print, and it's like $50 if you wanted to buy that on Amazon. I have that because I bought it way back in like 2003 when it was a new printing. The Terror of Trigon, also a printing from 2003. I'm pretty sure it's out of print. I think there's only one more paperback volume from that run. I think it's Who is Donna Troy, which I don't have that volume. And then, other than that, there's like 3 omnibuy, which are like, 400 pages each. One of them is out of print. Volume 1, if you wanted to buy it online, would be like $200. I'm not going to pay $200 for like 400 pages of comic. It's just not worth it. Even if it's the greatest comic in the world, it's not worth it. And then the other 2 omnibuy, they're more reasonably priced, but I'm not going to buy volume 2 and 3 without volume 1. And then you've got the Archives editions, which are like 7 or 8 issues a piece. But again, the first volume is like $150. So like the Archive editions, those volumes are also in hardcover. They're significantly shorter than the omnibuy, but the first volume is still insanely priced, and I'm not going to pay $100 for a book that collects 7.5 issues. So long story short, it's really hard to find Marv Wolfman's run on Teen Titans, unless you go back issue hunting, which you can do that, that's an option. It's not easy, because you're not going to find every issue of Marv Wolfman's Teen Titans in a single store, but unless you do that, you're not really going to find a whole lot of stuff. I said all of that to say that I decided to reread Teen Titans Games yesterday. That was the first thing that I reviewed on this channel, which was a still image and audio over the image. That was the very first thing that I did like that. So if you were to re-watch that video of mine, I'm not suggesting that you do that, but if you did, you would notice that I had a lot of technical difficulties. I wasn't really good at editing yet, and I feel like I've gotten better since then. But anyway, when I first read that book sometime last year, I wasn't a huge fan of it. I felt like it was kind of disappointing after going about 10 years hearing about this story that never did happen. I don't know why that guy's not going, but okay, I'm going in front of him. Anyway, so yeah, Teen Titans Games. I had heard for about 10 years about this story that George Perez and Marv Wolfman had worked on that was never going to come out, and then suddenly it comes out, and I thought, well, this is okay, but it wasn't what I was expecting. I think part of it was that I just had unrealistic expectations. I talked a little bit about this in my video when I reviewed that book. I wanted to talk about, I think the book is actually better than what I thought the first time. This is probably my first re-review in my channel, but I reread Teen Titans Games on Saturday, and I really enjoyed it. There's still some problems that I have with it. First and foremost, my biggest problem is that King Faraday ends up being the big bad, and that's not my problem. I don't have a problem with this shady government agent becoming a villain in this book, or at least his villainous plan is made known. I don't have a problem with that. My problem is that, okay, so way back in like 1988 when they first started planning this story, they had this idea where King Faraday worked for the government, and in real life, the government, they will hire writers and, creative writing people to come up with these scenarios where the government could get attacked or the country could be under attack. And they come up with these scenarios that someone in the government is not going to think of. And then the government, it's their job to look at these scenarios and find a way to outthink the scenarios. So in the story, King Faraday had hired some people like that, and one of them was basically insane and was saying, listen, here's a way that the country is in danger. King Faraday was like, you're right, the country is in danger. And then he would go and tell his bosses, and his bosses would say, no, you're wrong, that's not going to happen. So King Faraday basically goes insane and is trying to put together this evil plan that this guy has done to prove that the country is in danger. In this weird, twisted way, King Faraday he's a patriot, and he's looking out for his country, and he is willing to destroy New York City in order to protect the rest of the country, basically. In the original idea, the games master was a real dude who was just playing games with people's lives, and he was wanting to play against the Teen Titans. He knew that King Faraday frequently relied on the Titans, and you can go, dude. And so he wanted to involve them in his little scheme. And then they realized, okay, King Faraday is the one who's been like nearly trying to destroy the city just to prove that America could potentially be in danger in such a way. In the actual story that we got, they changed it up a little bit so that there wasn't really a games master. There was King Faraday putting all of this together, and then we find out that King Faraday became a schizophrenic, and he has multiple personalities, and one of the personalities is the games master and is putting this whole thing together, and then the good King Faraday is trying to stop this from happening. First and foremost, I want to say this is a really good villain plan. Far too often, I find that in any superhero story, whether it's in comic books or in movies, the villain plan usually is just really terrible. For example, Thor: The Dark World. I thought that I didn't even think the villain had motivations. It's not that I didn't think the villain didn't have motivations. It's that the villain did not have motivations. And I think you have something like this where the villain is actually, he has good intentions, but his methods are really extreme. I thought it was very interesting. The whole villain scheme was incredibly interesting. My big problem with the Teen Titans game story as we actually got it was that at the very end it's like, oh, by the way, King Faraday has another personality who's been doing all this. It felt really forced. And they talked about in the commentary in the back of the book, they talked about the reason that they changed this was because they didn't want to introduce this games master near the end of the book, and he would say, hey, I'm the bad guy, I'm the one who did all of this. They didn't want to do that because it would it would feel kind of out of nowhere, I guess is what I'm saying. Understandable. You don't want a villain to come out of nowhere 4/5 of the way into the story and then say, hey, I'm the bad guy. But I feel like the story as we got it, we had a strategist who was supposed to be like the opposing number to Nightwing. He was showing up fairly early in the book. So I feel like the story could have been worked in such a way where the strategist was the games master, and then King Faraday could still be responsible for this whole thing happening, but making him into a schizophrenic, I feel like, was a big problem. And I guess this isn't the best re-review, if I'm being honest, but honestly, I wanted to say the whole story works a lot better on a second read than I think it did on the first read. The first read, I really felt like it was disjointed because you have this story that these two guys, George Perez and Marv Wolfman, came up with in the 1980s, and then they finished the story in 2010. So I felt like it was very disjointed. I still feel like it's a little disjointed. I still feel like they needed just one or two more pages to really explain, okay, this guy was the games master. I think if they had just done that, if they had said the strategist guy was the games master, and then they got rid of the whole King Faraday has a second personality thing, if they had just gotten rid of that, I think this story would have been really great. As is, I think it's pretty good. I still think maybe, I don't remember in my original review, I don't remember if I said that you should go and read the story or not. I do think you should. Whether you are a Teen Titans fan or not, whether you've read anything from George Perez and Marv Wolfman or not, I would suggest reading Games. That's my new recommendation. I don't remember what I said in my previous review, but I am saying it now. If you've never read anything Teen Titans, this would be, for the most part, a really good introduction to the characters. It's fairly good at being new reader friendly. The only example in this that I can really think of where it's like you probably needed some background on the Teen Titans to really understand what they're talking about here. At one point, Beast Boy mentioned something that happened in the Judas Contract story. If you've never read that, if you've never seen the cartoon, you're not going to have any idea what he's talking about. I feel like maybe that was the only moment in this book where you really needed to be a fan of the Teen Titans from that era to really understand that moment. But I do feel like if you've been hearing from someone like this guy who's been saying Marv Wolfman and George Perez's run on Teen Titans is so awesome, I wish that it was available for everyone to read, and then you're wanting to read something from those guys and you find that it's really hard to do that, I would suggest go ahead and read Games. I think it's a nice little time capsule in that, you know, it was put out in 2011, but it's a story that's set in the 1980s, and it's very much an 80s story, and I don't mind that. You know, there's some things that are a little hard to swallow if you aren't familiar with them. For example, in this story, for about 19/20ths of this story, Beast Boy has a mullet, an ugly, ugly mullet, and then on the last page, he doesn't have a mullet anymore. I'm okay with that because Beast Boy had a mullet in like the early 90s, so, you know, it's still an ugly haircut, but whatever. But yeah, that's about all I have to say. This has been a really, really sporadic re-review. This has not been as cohesive as it was in my mind before I started filming this thing, but that's really all I've got here. I think that if you haven't read it before, go ahead and read Games. If you read it once, like me, and you're thinking that was really bad, reread it, and I think you might be surprised at how it holds up. That's all I have here, so I'm going to go ahead and catch you guys later. If you like this video, be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys tomorrow with a different kind of video. So, catch you guys later. Have a good one.